Gary Kubiak had some really good things to say about DeMeco Ryans when he joined the radio show earlier this week. I am Landry Locker. I'm the number one source for Texans digital daily content. Also, host of In the Loop 10 to 2 Central Monday through Friday on Sports Radio 610, the Odyssey app. And that's where I had the pleasure, always a pleasure to talk to Gary Kubiak, especially around this time. That's where I had the pleasure of speaking to Gary Kubiak along with my co-host John Lopez about DeMeco Ryans and all of the excitement going on around here. And Gary Kubiak, the great Gary Kubiak, had some really insightful things to say about the head coach of the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans, starting with something that they can both relate to, the education that they got and the philosophies and the people they learned under in order to get to this point.
Let's not forget where he's coming from, who he's been with the last few years. If you work for Kyle, like I work for his dad, he makes you study both sides of the ball. He makes you, as a defensive coordinator, understand what I'm trying to do to you offensively on the practice field. So DeMeco's knowledge, I mean, we know what it is defensively, but his knowledge of offensive football and how Kyle tries to attack defenses, that has really grown for him as a football coach too.
And I think that's interesting because you look at coaching under Shanahan's and then taking those lessons with you. I mean, I'm assuming that Kyle Shanahan has a lot of the same philosophies, and maybe Gary can be a resource. We'll hear from him in a sec about whether he wants to be a resource for DeMeco Ryans. But maybe Gary can kind of realize, when I went and I was a head coach after working with Shanahan, maybe there was something that he did that didn't really register with me, and maybe he can give DeMeco a heads up. There's just a lot of education. There's DeMeco Ryans, the education that he's gone through is just insane. If you just look at everyone that he's been around, everyone that he's impacted, it's an insane education. I don't know that there's been this much of just a balanced education from being a player to being traded to getting hurt to playing for Andy Reid, to playing for Chip Kelly, to playing for Gary Kubiak, to working under Kyle Shanahan, just all the stuff. There's just all kinds of education. And I'm sure there's been people who've had opportunities to have that, but the great thing about an education is if you're a sponge like DeMeco Ryans, you're taking in this information, there's a chance that you just see that put to practice. And there's just so much to be excited about with DeMeco Ryans. And because of that, Gary Kubiak, he's happy for the city that he called home.
I'm just so excited for for Houston, excited for DeMeco and his family. What a tremendous hire, and just I'm just like you guys. I'm really looking forward to it. He'll do a great job.
It'll be interesting. I don't know what guarantees can be made. I don't even know, what the realistic expectations will be, but it's going to be a fun ride. Hopefully it's going to be a long ride. And I think Gary Kubiak's going to be along for the ride in some way, shape, or form. Let's hear from the man himself. This is Gary Kubiak on whether or not he would like to be a resource for DeMeco Ryans. I know he's retired. Last time I saw him, he's looking pretty good. But does he want to be a resource for his former captain?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll have background with DeMeco. It's kind of special for me because that class that we drafted that year, that came through and had a lot to do with turning the program around, and obviously he was a huge piece of that. And just looking at the press conference the other day and seeing all those players that were sitting there supporting him, just tells you how well he is, how well he's thought of, guys. And I don't have to tell you all that. And it just makes everybody want to root for him and do everything they can to help him be successful here in Houston.
Yeah, and you hear people talking about that, whether it's people, guys at the Super Bowl like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, who had some really good things to say about him. You hear, you saw the attendance of the former teammates. You hear people talk about him. You hear Kyle Shanahan talk about him. He just kind of lights up, and you can kind of feel that with Gary Kubiak, who was on radio show In the Loop 10 to 2, Sports Radio 610. Download the Odyssey app, check it out. Also, be sure to subscribe and like this video and ride along with me. Whether you're a Texans fan or not, this is the top resource, and the digital game is picking up. So spread the love, but make this your home base, and I promise you will not regret it. Got you covered. Constantly, we talk to players, coaches, owners. We're at all the games, flagship of the Texans, and they let us hammer them. And hopefully, right now is just not the time because it's a really good time to be in this city and having interest in the Texans doing good things because fan base has been kind of kicked in the nuts lately. This is the generic question. You know how there's always the generic question that someone is asked, and I'm sure they get asked it 100 times. And whenever someone wants to ask about DeMeco Ryans, the most generic question is, were there early signs that you knew he would be a coach? They'll ask that to the players. They'll ask that to the former coaches. I've yet to hear anyone say, hell no, he was an idiot when I first met him. Here was Gary Kubiak asked that generic question. Were there any early signs that DeMeco could be a coach? I didn't ask this question.
I think you run across players as coaches that you sit around the staff room and stuff and say, damn, he's going to be a great coach someday. But, you never know if guys really, if that's something they want to do. When guys get out of football, they've been playing for so long and been a big part of their life, and guys, have a little question sometimes. Do I want to make that commitment to keep going? But I think we all saw that in DeMeco. We felt like he was a coach on the field when he played. And you got to give a lot of credit, really, to like Johnny Holland. I haven't heard Johnny mention much, but Johnny stayed after DeMeco. Kyle stayed after DeMeco. And they kind of talked him into saying, hey, DeMeco, you got to give us a try. Come give it a look with us. And I'd be damned. He does it. He's a natural fit. He found the love for it. And what is it? 6 years later, he's the head coach in the NFL. So I think the biggest thing is everybody's just so proud of his path. And, coaching's a better place because somebody like DeMeco is a part of it.
Damn, Gary. That's why you ask Gary every question, because he's going to give you something. Gary does not tap out. You can ask Gary the most basic question. He's going to give you that clip. Talked about DeMeco leaning on Johnny Holland and leaning on Kyle Shanahan. I know Holland was here for a little bit, kind of an OG influence. And he said the coaching profession is going to be better because DeMeco is here. That is the one thing that we talk about as we kind of look at what the Texans are going to do with their staff and who are they going to hire. We talked about this today, and I talked about it with McLean. Like, are there going to be any OG influences for DeMeco, or is he just going to be able to have Gary Kubiak a phone call away? Because some people think you bring in a guy who used to be a head coach and he helps you out and helps you go through the growing pains. I don't necessarily think it's that crucial. I know guys like McLean do, but I don't know. Like, who was Kyle Shanahan's guy? Did he have any head coach like walking around? I'm not familiar with what their staff was in 2017 when he first got to the San Francisco 49ers, but like, did he have some sort of coach? Let's look this up. 2017 staff. This is an off the go. I didn't plan on even looking this up. But let's see. The roster, man, their roster was trash. They were not that good. They had Kyle Shanahan. Mike McDaniel was on the staff. Mike LaFleur was on the staff. Good God, Kyle Shanahan can put some stuff out. Saleh was on the staff. Johnny Holland was the linebackers coach. Then he had DeMeco and Bobby Slowick, both quality control at the same time. So that's interesting to see. And there's not a former head coach on there, so he didn't have, a former head coach running around with him. He just had his young dudes and they were going out there and doing their thing. And they had, a couple of guys on there that weren't as young as them, but that's what Kyle Shanahan did. So I don't buy into this, you have to have some sort of old, like a Romeo Crennel rolling around on a golf cart or something like that. I don't, and Romeo's not an option. I'm just using that as an example. But I don't think you need that. I think you can learn on your own. Here's Gary Kubiak talking about mistakes. This is a question I asked about the staffing. It's obviously important to put together a good staff. I think Nick Sirianni is a prime example of, first of all, a badass roster. But second of all, you got assistants now who are, being talked to for head coaching gigs. But not everyone can put together a staff well and immediately. I asked Gary Kubiak what the biggest mistakes that can be made whenever putting together your first coaching staff.
Well, probably the biggest mistakes you make are when you get in too big of a hurry. You think, golly, you feel like you're behind already. The season's been over for a month and we need to get going. And you can make some mistakes if you get in too big a hurry. I always told Bob McNair when Bob gave me the job, everybody who does interviews wants to talk about, who's coming with you. How about your staff? And I remember telling Bob, the most important thing is whether or not I'm the right fit for your organization. We'll figure that other part out. We'll take our time. We'll get good coaches, and I think that's the way to approach it. Now, I mean, I'm sure DeMeco's got a lot of people tugging on him right now, but right now it's time to just settle into your routine, know what you want, talk to a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there, and just make sure you find people with the same vision you have. So DeMeco's always been very patient and in his life and what he wants to do, and I'm sure he'll approach this the same way.
See, Bobby Slowick being quality control with DeMeco Ryans in 2017, that's something we just dug up. We knew they were together, but starting off in quality control together, I got to figure that they've spent a lot of time together. If I were calling my shot, and again, I always say when I call shots, mark it, play it if I screw it up. I would think Bobby Slowick's probably the OC by Friday. Maybe. Don't know. I mean, he's definitely the betting favorite. Kyle knows. Kyle's kind of weird because I think Belichick kind of gets a little pissy when he loses coaches. Kyle seems to really, he doesn't want to do it and he'll joke about it, but it does seem like he likes spreading the wisdom, which is cool. And DeMeco Ryan seems to have plenty of it. Here's Gary Kubiak talking about the most difficult. We talked about, mistakes you can make when hiring a staff. What about the most difficult things that you learn as a head coach? Tell us about that, Gary.
I try not to bother him too much, but I gave him a piece of advice that I got a long time ago, right after he was hired. I said, DeMeco, I said, remember this. I said, somebody told me this a long time ago, and I remember the piece of advice was, it'll get done. And at the time, I thought, what the hell does that mean? And I said, DeMeco, carry that with you because you're going to feel overwhelmed. There's so much to do. Just take your time, be patient in what you're doing. Things will get done. Make sure you surround yourself with great people. And that's the most important thing right now. Surrounding himself with great people, the excitement of the town, the excitement of the new, all of that stuff's going to push him forward. But just being really set on, getting the good people around him so he can go to work.
Man, I tell you what, man. I know Gary will talk to anybody, I'm sure, but to have that a phone call away, like DeMeco Ryans does, and you can hear Gary Kubiak talking about the advice that he gave him, and you can tell he put some thought into it, and it must have been an in-depth conversation. That's an excellent resource to have. On top of all the other resources, the fact you got this guy, and it's no coincidence that Minnesota wanted him around for a little bit. It's no coincidence that the Texans are DeMeco's going to want him around, and to have this wisdom a phone call away, it's a good resource, and it's damn good to have Gary Kubiak and all the Texans from the past actually wanting to be a part of things right now. It's absolutely awesome. Awesome. Regardless the reason, whether it's the hire, whether it's the POS being gone, person of service, whatever it is, it's awesome to hear some of these voices and to hear some of these voices excited, not having to, when you talk to a former Texan the last 2 years, it's basically like, yeah, well, we had some good times. Maybe they'll turn it around. Yeah, David Culley seems like a nice guy. Lovey Smith. Don't know why that creepy bald guy was talking to me for 5 minutes out there, but yeah. Now they're legit excited. JJ Watt was on PMT today. He was speaking. We'll go through some of that tomorrow, or I guess I should say today on the show. In the loop, download the Odyssey app. We'll hear some of that some of that J.J. Watt stuff. The sons of Gary Kubiak, Clint and Clay, I believe, are the names. They've been mentioned as potential members of the DeMeco Ryans staff. Here is Gary Kubiak talking about the rumors about his sons being linked to DeMeco.
They got to keep working, but Clay's there with Kyle and got a great job and learning a lot of football. You know, Clint was in Denver last year. He's sitting there waiting to see what happens there with Sean and those things. But I've been keeping up, and I listen to you guys. I know I don't like telling y'all that, but I listen to you from time to time. And you know, I'm listening to some of the things going on, and I think DeMeco's got a pretty dang good idea of you know, what he wants to do, and you know, I just have confidence in what he's going to put together, and I look forward to watching it just like you guys.
There you go. Listener, Gary Kubiak. He listens a lot. I don't let him tell you different. Just kidding. Probably not too much. Here was the final question that we asked Gary Kubiak. We don't know what kind of coach DeMeco Ryans is going to be. We have our context clues. Expect, you know, a little bit of Robert Saleh type excitement on the sidelines. We know what to expect from his defense when he has elite talent. It'll be interesting to see how he handles, you know, maybe not having that much talent. So we'll get a taste of that. But other than that, we're going to be learning about DeMeco Ryans and what type of coach he's going to be. And there's reason for optimism, but is there anything in Gary Kubiak that we could see from DeMeco Ryans? Here's Gary Kubiak, his walk-off question when he joined the show In the Loop on Sports Radio 610, the Odyssey app.
Well, DeMeco is a very straightforward guy, you know, and the one thing that I would tell the city of Houston, and you guys know this, I mean, DeMeco's got the biggest smile and the nicest guy, but let me tell you, DeMeco get after them players. He knows how to coach them. He knows how to challenge them, and that's why he relates so well to players. Instant respect, because that's the way he treats people, but he's going to be demanding as well. And, you know, that's all you can ask for in a coach. You know, and when you have somebody like that, I think you're going to attract players free agency wise and all those things, and you're going to get the most out of them.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of coaches don't have that instant credibility as a player. I don't think it's the end all be all. I think a lot of times it can be over romanticized, and a lot of times it'll lead you to want a coach that maybe you don't want. See Magic Johnson with the Lakers. And there's plenty of examples of guys who used to play at places and they go coach, it just doesn't work out. But when you're DeMeco Ryans and you were that good for that long, not a lot of coaches can say that. I mean, I would say he might be, along with Mike Vrabel, the best former player in the league right now as a head coach. Assuming Jeff Saturday doesn't get the gig in Indianapolis, and we already know he can't coach worth a damn, it might be between those two. Again, doesn't matter, but it is like some instant credibility and some instant respect, at least in the locker room, I would think. So that you can't teach that kind of experience. You can't teach the education that DeMeco Ryans has gotten. And you know, once you're actually in the same room as him and you kind of see how he handles things, you kind of say, "Damn, I get it." I get it. Because when I was first going to that press conference, I was doing the show with Smitty, Wade Smith, uh, his former teammate. And, you know, Wade was just like, "Yeah, you'll see." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, he's like, "Oh, you'll see. You're the podium critic. You'll see. You'll understand what I'm talking about." I'm like, "All right." Walk in there, a lot of hype, and you're trying to look past the hype and listen to the actual substance of what DeMeco Ryans was saying. Boom. Hit it out the park. And Smitty was right. I did see what it was about. And you hear Gary Kubiak talk, he's not going through the motions. I mean, there's been times where we've had a coach talk about a former player, we've had a former player talk about a coach, and they're not putting much thought into it. I mean, they'll say nice things, but it's just the typical basic generic answer, nice things. You can tell they weren't really touched by, you know, that player or coach. Everyone you talk to about DeMeco Ryans legit touched, whether it's Fletcher Cox, whether it's Brandon Graham, whether it's Gary Kubiak, whether it's his former teammates. It's all you hear. And you just heard Gary Kubiak. Maybe he's got you excited. It was really good to hear from him. And again, that was on. If you want to check out the full interview, it's Sports Radio 610 and the Odyssey app. You can hear me 10 to 2 p.m. Central every Monday through Friday. I'm on Sports Radio 610. You can see me here, also hear me in the locker room here, daily digital content about the Texans, subscribe, all that type of stuff. And we'll be in this together. It's fun times. It's been a bad rocky road. It's good to hear from Gary Kubiak. Let me know what you thought about what Gary Kubiak had to say about DeMeco Ryans in the comments. I try to reply to those as much as possible. And ride along with me. No matter what happens, we're in this together.